never made it, but I know what it takes. I'm motivated by a mix of emotion. Got my statement, and I'm reading it slow so I can understand it fully. Appreciate my standing, go out of this world and right on time. Oh, never in my life have I seen the sky light up like this. I'm far away from Earth and I wanna know if you exist. Mission control, do you read me? Send me my coordinates lately. Mission control, am I drifting? Tie me to someone who will love me, yeah. Wait, I think I'll last a bit longer. Fine.
Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd family a part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. Well, I said in yesterday's video that today we were going to be talking some college football. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Hopefully you enjoyed the first game of the week last night when Appalachian State was all over Georgia State. Appalachian State improves to 4-3 on the season, and I'm glad that their record is only 4-3 because typically Appalachian State wins 10 or 11 games every year. But I'm glad that right now they're only 4-3 because that makes Texas A&M look even worse. And anything that makes Texas A&M look worse, I will fully support. But just like last week when we had a lot of games that featured two ranked teams playing each other, we had the same thing this week. The only difference is last week there was 6 games with two ranked teams playing each other. This week there's 5. So not quite as many, but it's close, so not much of a difference. And Clemson plays at noon this week, and I'm actually glad about that because they've had a bunch of night games this year. I believe this is their first noon game of the year. I know they played Furman at 3:30, but I believe this is their first noon game of the year. So I actually will be able to watch it live before I go to wrestling, and I ain't got to record it and watch it later. So I'm actually glad they're playing at noon. But any thoughts on the games this weekend, please feel free to let me know. Tonight, we have Virginia going up against Georgia Tech. This is a game that, looking at the schedule about a month ago, you thought, boy, that game's going to be awful. But now that Georgia Tech has changed head coaches, and of course right now their coach is still on an interim basis, but I got a feeling he's going to be their full-time permanent head coach. But since they've changed head coaches and got rid of Geoff Collins, they look a lot better. And Jeff Sims looks like the 5-star quarterback that actually committed to them a couple of years ago. And whatever Jeff Collins was teaching him was not working because he was getting progressively worse every game. But just in this short time frame that Jeff Collins has been gone, Jeff Sims has done a complete 360. Virginia is still not very good. What's ruined Virginia for the year is that Tony Elliott became their head coach, and Tony Elliott is a very successful play caller, and he was very successful for many years at Clemson. Both of their national championships they won, and all 4 they played for, Tony Elliott was their OC. People act like he just all of a sudden forgot how to coach offense because last year was so bad, but you look at his all-time career stats as an offensive coordinator, he's been great. Every single offensive stat you can have, he broke. The most completions in a season, Tony Elliott was the OC. Most touchdown passes in a season, Tony Elliott was the OC. But all the years he was so successful, Clemson had a really good running game because Tony Elliott likes to be balanced. And Virginia was top 3 in the country last year in total offense, but it was all Brennan Armstrong. They just dropped back and threw it every play, and it worked. Well, Tony Elliott decided he was going to make them balanced, and he's done that, but now their offense has gone from being 3rd in the country to being average at best because they have no run game. So if he can find a running back, he can be successful. Until then, he's not, because you can't make an unbalanced team be a balanced team. And Virginia has no running game, so you can't force a team that has no running game to run the ball. It just doesn't work that way. Tomorrow night we have Tulsa going up against Temple. And then on Saturday, the noon games, we have Iowa against Ohio State. And I'm hoping that Iowa has the defense to hang around for a while. We know they're not going to score. Their offense is absolutely putrid. But I'm hoping their defense, being as good as it is, they'll hang around for at least a half. And then we also have Syracuse at Clemson. That's our first game of the weekend with 2 ranked teams facing off against each other. They're actually 2 of the 9 current FBS undefeated teams. I'll talk more about that coming up later on in the video. But also at noon on Saturday, we have Cincinnati at SMU. Should also be another good game. Then at 12:30, we have Duke, who's actually played pretty good this year, going up against Miami. Then at 3:30 Saturday, we have Ole Miss at LSU. If the LSU offense that showed up last week shows up this week, that might be a pretty good game. Then we have another game that features 2 ranked teams facing off against each other. Number 9, UCLA, and number 10, Oregon. The winner of that game will definitely have a leg up over there in the Pac-12. Of course, we know the Pac-12 has already gotten rid of divisions. It's just the 2 teams that have the overall best conference record that'll play again in December for the Pac-12 championship. Then we have Texas at Oklahoma State, which is also coming up at 3:30 on Saturday. Boston College and Wake Forest is also 3:30 on Saturday. And speaking of divisions, if the ACC had already gotten rid of divisions and they just had the 2 best teams playing each other for the ACC championship, the ACC championship game would be Clemson and Wake Forest. But of course, it cannot happen because they both play in the same division. But they are clearly the 2 best teams in the ACC. And then we have 7 o'clock Saturday night, Mississippi State going up against Alabama. We'll see if Alabama can bounce back from their first loss of the season last weekend. And it's so funny to me, and it shows you why I never use referees for an excuse. To me, whoever your team is, when you use the referees as an excuse, as a reason why you lost, that's a cop-out. You're being a sissy. You don't want to just be man enough or woman enough to say, hey, we got beat. So you have to find somebody to blame it on. And blaming the referees is the stupidest, most idiotic thing anybody can do. And it's so funny to me how college football fans always say that Alabama gets all the calls. Alabama gets all the calls. Any questionable call always favors Alabama. And anytime a referee throws a flag that anybody thinks is controversial in any way, oh, it's because it's Alabama. And then Alabama gets beat last week, and the first thing I hear everybody say is, well, they lost because of referees. Oh, so when they win, it's because the refs helped them. But when they lose, it's because the refs cheated them. That just shows how stupid it is when we blame the referees for everything. The referees can't have an in for Bama and also have it out for Bama. That's not the way it works. And a few weeks back, you had the game between Kentucky and Ole Miss. And if you watched that game, you saw that Kentucky way, way, way outplayed Ole Miss. It wasn't close. Kentucky actually left about 21 points on the board. They missed 2 extra points. They had a man running for a touchdown, and he was tackled by his own man. And then they had a touchdown called back because they didn't get lined up properly. That right there is 16 points that they cost themselves. And if they wouldn't have cost themselves those 16 points, that controversial call at the end wouldn't have mattered. You know why it wouldn't have mattered? Because they would have been way ahead and the call wouldn't have mattered. But since Kentucky made all those mistakes, they want to blame that call and on costing them the game. If you don't make mistakes, those controversial calls by the referees won't matter. But we always want to bypass a stupid drop pass or a stupid fumble or a missed block. And all of a sudden, we'll just completely bypass all that stuff and blame the referee. Like, it's okay if our players make mistakes, but the referees, they can't make mistakes. So I've been laughing my butt off all week long because all these people always want to say that Bama gets all the calls, but then as soon as Bama gets beat, oh, they got beat because of the refs. It don't work that way. Referees don't favor nobody. The referees do not care who wins. The referees do not care who loses. The referees have a full-time job to be a referee. That's their jobs. They ain't got it in for anybody. They ain't got it out for anybody. They go out there, they make calls. They make bad decisions just like everybody else does. They make mistakes just like everybody else does. But it gets on my nerves how everybody wants to blame everything all the time on the referees like they're supposed to be out there and never miss a call in the history of time. It doesn't work that way. They make mistakes too. But if the players don't leave points on the field, then the missed calls by the referees won't matter. 7:30 Saturday night, we have Texas A&M against South Carolina. Should actually be a good game because of the fact that Texas A&M cannot score points. Then at 8 o'clock Saturday night, we have what's going to be a really good game in the Big 12, and that is Kansas State against TCU. Now, Kansas State only has one loss on the season, and that was to Tulane, which, if you don't know anything at all about Tulane, you think, boy, what a terrible loss. But Tulane's actually a really good football team. And TCU having a first-year head coach, he's not a first-time head coach, but it's his first year at TCU. Everybody thought they were going to be pretty dreadful this year, and they might just be the best team in the Big 12. But who are the 9 undefeated teams? I mentioned earlier Syracuse and Clemson. Of course, one of them has to lose Saturday because they play each other. But anybody who watches college football knows that every year, right around Halloween weekend or 1st of November, we start saying, man, we got so many undefeated teams. What are we going to do? And then by the time the season ends, we've got 3 or 4. Well, this year, we ain't even hit late October yet, and we're only down to 9. Now, one of the teams that most folks thought had a chance to run the table was Coastal Carolina, and they lost big time last week to Old Dominion. So there is no small group of 5 team this year that's currently undefeated. We have 9 FBS teams who are still undefeated, and they're all in a Power 5 conference. We have Georgia, Ohio State, Tennessee, Michigan, Clemson, Ole Miss, TCU, UCLA, and Syracuse is the lowest ranked of the 9 undefeated teams. Of course, Syracuse and Clemson play Saturday, so somebody has to lose. And if Georgia and Tennessee both remain undefeated until they play, one of them has to lose. Same way with Ohio State and Michigan. So even if we don't have any upsets this weekend, even after the game between Syracuse and Clemson, we're going to have at most 8 unranked, unbeaten teams. So this is definitely a year where we ain't got to look back late in the season and say, man, we've got so many undefeated teams, because it's not going to happen. We're going to have at most 3 or 4, if that many. We may not have anybody this year that runs the table. That's the good thing about college football this year is I've said pretty much from about week 3 that I think Georgia and Ohio State are the 2 best teams in the country, and I still do think that. And I think Clemson and Michigan and Tennessee are right behind them. But even though I believe those are the 5 best teams, they all have flaws. I don't see any team this year that's by far, up and away, the best team in America. It wouldn't surprise me if Georgia got beat. It wouldn't surprise me if Ohio State got beat. It wouldn't surprise me if Michigan got beat. I think they're all really good, but it's not like one of those years where one team just looks like they're just by far the best team in the country. I think even the best teams have flaws, and each team, their flaw is different. Some it's their defense, some it's the offensive line, some it's their wide receivers, some it's their secondary. So each team has their own flaws, but each team has a flaw. And if that flaw gets bad enough on the wrong day against the wrong team, you're going to get beat. So that's the good thing this year about college football is that I honestly, really, truly wouldn't be surprised if we ended the season with no undefeated teams. But I also wouldn't be surprised if we did end the season with 3 or 4 undefeated teams, because they are the best teams. But even the best teams this year have flaws. Again, any thoughts on the games this weekend, please feel free to let me know. I think it's really, really good that we have a season like this where we have only right now 9 undefeated teams, and it will drop to at least 8 by Saturday night, because it makes it more entertaining. It makes it more interesting, because even the best teams are going to have those games where they only win a game by a touchdown, or they win a game by 3 points, which for the most part, as an outsider, if you're just watching the game, you would rather have a close game like that than you would where the game is decided by halftime. Who wants to watch a game like that? You feel like you wait all day long for a game, and then the game starts, and by halftime you're like, well, I think I'll find another game to watch because the game is over with. You want to see a close game, and that's what we're getting for the most part this year. Even the really, really, really good teams are having some close games because they have flaws. And that's why a lot of people like the NFL better than college, because no matter how good you think a certain player is in college, only about 5% of college football players make it to the NFL. So when you watch college football on Saturdays, you see a lot of missed tackles, missed blocks, dropped passes, bad interceptions, bad fumbles, horribly missed field goals. And then when you watch the NFL, you don't see that stuff. So you pretty much watch games with, instead of bukus and bukus of mistakes, you watch a game with 1 or 2 mistakes. And to a lot of people, that makes it better because you're seeing the best of the best. But to a lot of people, it makes it worse because you want to see guys mess up, because you want to know how they'll react after they mess up. And that's why, for the most part, the NFL scores are so much lower than college football scores. It's because you don't see the interceptions. You don't see all the fumbles. You don't see the muffed punts because they're pretty much perfect. And to a lot of people, it's better. To a lot of people, it's not better. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. Did you hear they were writing a book about constipation? It never came out. And that wraps it up for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.